Hey, everybody. Before we get started, I want to thank my friends at Hatch for producing this episode. You can get unlimited podcast editing and strategy for one flat rate by visiting hatch.fm. All right, let's get into the show. Welcome to Distribution First, the show where we flip content marketing on its head and focus on what happens after you hit publish. Each week, I share playbooks, motivations, stories, and strategies to help you repurpose and distribute your content because you deserve to get the most out of everything you create. Hey friend, unfortunately, I've learned the value of focusing on a few key channels the hard way. I used to try and be active on multiple platforms, whether it was Facebook back in the day or using X and now LinkedIn and doing email and YouTube. But I found myself spread way too thin. Even when I had a team, the more channels we tried to focus on, the harder it became. And I hated what I was doing. I ended up hating what I was doing, and it came through in the content I was sharing with the audience. So that's when I knew that I had to make a change and really start to focus on the channels that mattered, not just the channels that I thought I should be on because somebody told me I should be there. And so that's what we're going to talk about today on this episode of Distribution First. We're actually going to go through 3 pitfalls of bad channels. What are the 3 main things that cause you to pick the wrong channel, and then how you can focus in and get better on the channels that you're actually using. And so that's what we're going to get into today. I'm super excited about it. Let's get into the show. All right, so 3 pitfalls of picking the wrong distribution channels. What I realized back, and this wasn't that long ago, honestly, and I've ebbed and flowed through this as I was creating content both for my own and honestly when I was working as an in-house marketer too. There's a lot of pressure to try and do a lot of things to try and get as much attention, to get as much reach, to get as much eyeballs on that content as possible. And I think it's a little bit, the irony is there though, that when you actually spread yourself across all these channels, it actually doesn't always help you. It actually can be a hindrance to what you're trying to do. And it's not the type of the decision that you just make once and you set with it. It's actually the type of decision that ripples out across your entire content strategy, because when you go to pick one channel, as soon as you add on another channel, what you're doing is you're committing to that channel, not only for you, not only for your team, but you're committing to that channel for your audience. What we do when we add another channel in the back of our mind is we say, hey, awesome. Hey, audience, here's where we're going to be at now. Here's what we're going to be doing. And here's what you can expect from us. And it puts a ton of pressure, not only on you and your team to be able to create that content, but to keep up with that over time. How I like to think about channels is narrowing your focus down into the ones that truly make an impact in what you're doing. So let's get into these pitfalls and see how we can avoid them. So pitfall number 1 is not knowing your audience. And this is such a big one. Your audience, they're probably all over the place. Your audience is probably on multiple channels doing multiple things. They might be on LinkedIn. They might be on YouTube. They might like podcasts. They might like reading newsletters. The reality is they probably like consuming a lot of types of content and like consuming it on a lot of different channels. The key for you, though, is to figure out which ones work for you and which ones are going to make the biggest impact on your audience over time. It's a tough balancing act. It really is, because the temptation is there to be on those, but you don't have to be on them all. Instead, what you want to do is focus on the channels that align with your strengths and you can be consistent and engage with without feeling overwhelmed. Because the last thing you want to do is jump from one content hamster wheel, creating content, doing all this, to another content hamster wheel of distributing. It's the last thing we want to do when we're creating our content strategies. Knowing where your audience hangs out is so key. Are they more likely to be on one place than another? They probably are. It's just on you to figure out where those places are going to be. Are they more likely to hang out in communities where you can actually interact with them and spend time with them? It's a longer term play. And none of this is overnight as far as being able to distribute this content and become sort of overnight. All your entire audience is going to want to buy your products and your services. It's not how it works. Figure out where are your best long-term bets to distribute that content across for your audience. And different channels are going to represent different opportunities. For example, if you're creating content on YouTube, if you're creating content for Google, that's going to hit one part of the funnel and one group of folks who are looking for a very particular thing. If you're creating content on LinkedIn or X or Instagram, it's going to hit a completely different type of person, buyer, and stage at where they're going to be at. Just coming up with a decent mix to be able to know where your audience is at and hit them over time. All right. Pitfall number 2, not understanding the channel. And this ties back into some of the things we just talked about, but this is one of the biggest problems I see, in particular inside of companies, is not understanding the channel. But honestly, even as an individual creator, again, the more channels you add, the more channels you're going to have to learn. It's not as simple as just posting and expecting growth. How LinkedIn works is completely different than how X works, which is completely different than how YouTube works. And you better know the ins and outs and the nuances, or at least be in the process of learning all of those nuances to see success in the content that you're creating. Just posting on a bunch of channels you don't understand is not going to help you in the long run. But if you can master a few channels, deeply understand them, understand what works, what doesn't work, what type of content, and this all ebbs and flows and changes over time. So what worked on LinkedIn 2 years ago does not work today. What worked on X 2 years ago does not work today. But unless you're constantly learning the channels, unless you're constantly evolving with what you're doing, it's going to be very, very hard for you to be able to stand out and to be able to make a real impact and build an audience. It's one thing to post content. It's one thing to hit publish. It's another to actually understand why you're there, what you're doing, what the purpose is of being there, and actually creating content that makes your audience want to do something, whether that's learn something new, buy something, hang out, just enjoy your content. But just posting stuff and ghosting out of there is no way to build an audience. It's no way to grow your channels. It's no way to actually do effective content distribution. I think my advice in this would be, again, mastering a few rather than, and going really deeply in what those things are. So at any given time, you're only going to be able to learn so many things unless you have a team. For example, when I was at TechSmith, I had a team of folks who were focused on SEO and blog content. I had a team of folks who was focused on YouTube content. I had a team of folks who were focused on social media content. And when you have different groups of different people who can focus on each one of those channels, absolutely. Let's figure out how to use those best and be able to spread ourselves across each of those channels and do that in an effective way. And actually, it was really, really helpful to be able to do that. We got to 5, 10, 100x the amount of views and in-depth things we were able to do with the content because we were able to spread those across different channels. But we were only able to do that because we had experts figuring out the nuances of each channel. Social media team did not have to figure out how to rank things in Google and at the same time figure out what was the best thumbnail and headline to put on YouTube. We had experts for each one of those places. And I think that's a very subtle nuance that whether you're an individual or you're working with agencies or you've got your own team in-house, figuring out how to use those people and those resources in a way that allows them to really focus in on what they're doing. I think that is how you start to scale up and add channels and build upon channels, is having dedicated people who can come in and focus on those specific things. So unless you're able to actually dive into a channel, learn it, spend time with it, be consistent on it, I would be very hesitant to be able to add that into your distribution mix. So number 3, choosing channels you don't enjoy. It's such a low-key thing that we don't think about, but unless you enjoy distributing content on a particular platform, you're probably not going to do it. People don't talk about this enough, but passion does matter. It matters in content creation and it matters in content distribution as well, because all you're doing when you're distributing content is creating micro versions of really good content and just doing it in a different way. Unless you're passionate about creating that type of content, it really doesn't make sense for you to keep on doing it. You're going to A, get bored, B, get sick of it, C, just stop doing it altogether because you're burnt out. If you don't like making videos, you're not going to create videos very long. Again, unless you're hiring this out and you're going to have other people do all the work and then potentially that can make sense. But most of us don't have that option. Most of us are in some way, shape, or form are going to be having our hands in the things that we're creating and distributing. Unless you like the channel, unless you have some sort of passion for writing, then a newsletter probably doesn't make sense. Unless you have a passion for video, being on a video heavy channel probably doesn't make sense. Unless you have a vehicle to create video content, it probably doesn't make sense for you to try and be on there, because you're not going to be able to do it consistently and do it at a high enough level and scale to compete with everybody else. Because that's the other thing with these channels. It's not just you out there in a silo. It's not just you talking to your audience. It's everybody talking to your audience and probably in some ways creating better content than you are. That's why we have to be balanced. You don't want to just show up and have really bad content if that is the gateway into your business. If somebody shows up to if you say you're on X or you say you're on Instagram and you post a few times on there, but somebody shows up there and the content is kind of just boring or it's not great, that could be their first and only impression of you and your content, even though you post really good stuff every single day on LinkedIn. As you think about what you're showing to your audience or even your potential audience and your potential customers, just keep that in mind. It's actually better in some ways for people to type in your company or your brand and not find you because then they have to figure out where you're actually at. Or you can figure out ways to use those channels to try to get them over to where you're actually at. So if you have an X account, but you don't really use it, you could put something in your bio about that and be able to get them over and say, actually, I post every day on LinkedIn. Or, hey, we are active over here. If you're looking for help and you're a business, hey, here's where you can actually go get that. And a lot of that, again, to tie it back to choosing the channels that you don't enjoy, you have to be genuinely interested in the channel because, again, these things change all the time. What works in any single distribution channel, even a more historical channel that's been around for a long time, like email, what works in email now is completely different than what worked probably 10 years ago. Everything is changing so much. Unless you have the time not only to learn that channel, enjoy that channel, but to be able to continue to learn that channel, you're going to struggle to be able to keep that channel afloat and make sure it actually succeeds for your company. And again, this is true of every single distribution channel across the internet, whether you're talking Google, email, social media, forums, Reddit, any single thing that you choose where you want to distribute paid ads, anything, whatever you're doing, there's those levels of understanding that you have to have where you are going to commit, you're going to learn, and then you're going to continue to learn ongoing as you build that channel out. Just a few key takeaways here as we wrap up this episode. And this is just a short, kind of off the cuff episode that I wanted to get out here for you all. So a few key takeaways here as we wrap up. To avoid these pitfalls, I just want to give you 3 things to try, because there's 3 pitfalls and let's come up with 3 things to try to be able to avoid these. So as a wrap, our 3 pitfalls: not knowing your audience, not understanding the channel, and choosing channels you don't enjoy. As we try to avoid these pitfalls, here are 3 things that I think we can try. Number 1, focus only on channels that work best for your business and your audience. So understand your audience and the channels they're using and focus only on those channels. And I would even go a step further and say focus on only one of those channels. Like I said, there could be lots of channels that your audience are on. There could be lots of places where they're hanging out. So I would pick one, learn that channel, understand that channel, be able to be consistent on that channel, build an audience on that channel. You would be far better off building an audience on one channel than building small, teeny little audiences that probably don't really take off across many, many places at once. And if you're early, maybe you test out a few things. Maybe you take and say, all right, for the next 3 to 6 months, we're going to test out multiple channels and just see where our people are at and what's working. But after a certain point, start to focus in on where you want to build that audience. Number 2, choose channels that align with your goals and your preferences. So this takes nuance, but understanding what your goals are is greatly going to determine which channels you choose. So if your goals are conversion, if your goals are we need people in the door now, your channels should be conversion-focused channels. Google, email, maybe YouTube with search. There is only a certain finite amount of people within your audience, probably less than 3%, that at any given point are ready to buy. So if your goal is conversion, you better figure out how best to get in front of those people. And typically that is a combination of search and email to be able to gather that information, pitch them a product, nurture them down the line. If you want to build a brand, shoot, you could do a multitude of things depending on who you want to get in front of. But that goal is going to be completely different, and the channels you choose are going to, and the frequency and what type of content, all of that is going to be completely different than if your goals were, hey, for this amount of time, we got to get as many people in the pipeline as possible. It's just a different goal. Understanding where your goal's at and how that aligns with the channels you choose, massive. Number 3, don't try to do too much at once. When you spread yourself thin and across anything, when you're trying to learn something new, when you're trying to build a new habit, when you're trying to start a new strategy, the more things that you try to do, the worse you're going to be at it. You're going to get overwhelmed immediately. You might start really, really hot. You might, first week, bam, we're going. But second week, third week, fourth week, all that starts to dwindle. And now you're feeling not only overwhelmed, but you're actually feeling discouraged because in your mind, you thought you were going to be able to do something that now you can't even do. Rather than make yourself go down that road, pick something that's actually you're able to accomplish, and pick something without spreading yourself too thin, without spreading yourself across multiple channels. Set up some goals for those things and then work your goals. And you will be able to find success in what you're doing that way. So again, focus on only the channels where your audience is at, and probably out of that, the best channel for you. Choose channels that align with your goals, and don't try to do too much to spread yourself too thin. Because if you spread yourself too thin too fast, you're going to burn out. And finally, before we wrap, one last tip here, save the best for last, because I think this will help you be able to truly pick the right channels and to be able to make sure you're able to distribute your content without burning out. And that is to create what I call a content floor. And a content floor is just creating a consistent rhythm of creating and sharing your content. What you need to do is prioritize your easy wins, which are high value, low effort activities that drive results. So what are your easy win channels? For me, easy win channels are LinkedIn and email. I'm pretty good at creating content consistently when it's in written form. I've been writing content on the internet for 15 years. For me to come down, sit down and write content for LinkedIn or for an email, not that difficult. That's an easy win. That's my content floor. What that looks like for me is a very basic example of my content floor would be, I am going to post on LinkedIn every single day, Monday through Friday. And that's what my audience will learn that I have to be able to provide to them. Oh, Justin, even if I don't say it, people will come to learn Monday through Friday. They're going to see me in their feed. With emails, I send a newsletter. Shout out if you want to get the newsletter and you're not on the newsletter, go to news.justinsimon.co. You can get on the newsletter. I send a weekly email every single Saturday morning. I have sent that email consistently since 2022. I don't even know how many emails we're on at this point, but it's just become part of my rhythm. Even when I was a full-time employee, I was writing an email every single week to send it out as a newsletter. And it just became part of my rhythm. Recording these podcast episodes has become part of my rhythm. It's just something that I have started to do and got used to and enjoy doing at this point. To go back, if I don't enjoy doing these things, that's when I know I have to start either rethinking the channel or the content itself, or maybe I just have to rethink how I'm doing it. Because if it's not fun, if it's not enjoyable, I'm not going to do it. These are the activities that they're not going to require a lot of effort, your content floor, your easy wins, but they're going to bring in the majority of your results. It's classic 80-20. Think about the things that are going to bring in 80% of your results with 20% of your actions. And that's true of channels, that's true of content, that's true across the board. So hopefully this episode was helpful for you as we think about creating channels, as we think about picking the right channels for your content. If this is something you're interested in, I have an entire workshop about picking the perfect channels. It's inside the Distribtuion First membership, which you get as a part of the monthly group workshops. Every single month, we do a group workshop together inside the community. And we also do a Q&A at the back end of the month as well. If you're interested in watching that workshop, getting all the past workshops, potentially getting all the future workshops, and you want to join the Distribution First community, I would encourage you to do that, to check it out today. If you go to distributionfirst.club, you get all the information. Would love to have you in there as well. So, friend, it's been awesome to have you listening to the show. I'm excited about this episode, and I really think it's going to help you a lot. So until next week, I will talk to you later. All right, I hope you enjoyed this episode of Distribution First, and thank you for listening all the way through. I appreciate you so much. And I hope you're able to apply what you learned in this episode one way or another into your content strategy as well. Speaking of strategy, we have a lot of things going on this year that are going to help you build your brand, 10x your content, and transform the way you do content marketing. Make sure to subscribe to the show and sign up for my newsletter at justinsimon.co so you don't miss a thing. I look forward to serving you in the next episode as well. And until then, take care, and I'll see you next time.